expected points, clean sheet odds, captaincy, players to buy, and I've got a little update on Mo Salah too. This video has all the information you need to know for Game Week 22. Alright, I'm going to start off this video by talking about the top players for expected points by each position. Starting off then with the goalkeepers, and Areola is the #1 goalkeeper for expected points for Game Week 22 according to DraftHound. You can find DraftHound in a link in the description below. Yeah, they've got Areola as the top goalkeeper. Obviously, he's got a chance of keeping a clean sheet against Bournemouth at home, and he does regularly make a load of saves to get saves bonus as well. So I think all of those things factor together are why the DraftHound algorithm has him at #1. Raya in second place. I think Arsenal were well back to keep a clean sheet against Nottingham Forest. Alisson in third. I have a feeling that they could well keep a clean sheet in that game against Chelsea. Martinez, Edison, Vicario, Johnston, Pickford, Henderson and Neto are the top keepers. Obviously, Henderson's probably the first choice keeper for Crystal Palace, and I'd have Vicario slightly higher, I would say, for expected points than he says there. Other than that, though, I largely agree with the expected points on this list. Defenders up next then, and Gabriel is the #1 defender for expected points in Game Week 22. And to be honest, I largely agree with that. As I said with Raya, I think Arsenal, and I personally believe they'll keep a clean sheet against Nottingham Forest. Alongside that, I think Gabriel's probably the outstanding attacking threat from that Arsenal defence. Now, Zinchenko and Ben White probably have a high, well, they definitely have a higher average position. But the set-piece threat that Gabriel carries is just so good. And for that reason, it's quite obvious why he's the top defender for expected points. Kyle Walker and Ake, second and third. Obviously, Man City, well back to keep a clean sheet, particularly having Burnley at home. That's a really nice fixture. Kyle Walker in particular, I think, is a really good option. In fact, I'll talk about him specifically towards the end of the video. But he started every game for Man City in the Premier League so far this season, which obviously suggests he's relatively nailed in the team. And if there's any opportunity to get a nailed Man City defender, I think you got to take it, and Kyle Walker certainly offers that option. Ake in third, he's a good option, but, you know, question marks on whether he'll start every week. Pedro Porro is obviously a really good option. The most attacking player in the Premier League this season, according to expected goal involvement data. And yeah, he sits in fourth place, 4.9 expected points. Brentford at home, a decent fixture. Chance for clean sheet and attacking returns there. Then we see a load of basically Arsenal, Man City and Liverpool defenders, with Mavropanos of West Ham rounded off the list, and Doty in there as well. Doty's a nice little option, although I wouldn't really back Luton to be keeping a clean sheet against Brighton, but he's looking good for attacking returns. I just think long term we can probably do a bit better for the price. However, he does have a double in Game Week 25, so you know, you could, well, potential double in 25, so yeah, could well pick him with that in mind. On now to the forwards, and there's another omission in Erling Haaland from this list. If Erling Haaland is deemed to be fit for Game Week 22, we don't have that information at the time of recording this video, so ultimately Julian Alvarez is top according to DraftTime because they don't expect Erling Haaland to play, basically. I think we need to wait for the news on Haaland. I mean, if he is fit to play and deemed fit, Burnley at home, you couldn't really ask for a much better fixture. I think he'd probably be the top player in the game for expected points if he is, but right now he's not, and we don't know, so Alvarez is the most certain player, I would say, to start of the two at the moment, and he's the top forward for expected points. Solanke in second, João Pedro in third, Watkins, Darwin Núñez, Werner's up there, which is interesting. He actually had a pretty decent game against Man United, I must say. Højlund, Isak, who I really like as an option, although he does have a difficult fixture with Aston Villa away. Chris Wood and Gabriel Jesus are your top forwards. A quick look then at the captaincy as a whole, and as I said, there's a couple of omissions from the DraftTime data, being Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne. If they do start and play, well, a majority of the game, I would put them ahead of Foden for expected points, but with the information we have at the moment, we just can't be sure on that, so I guess I agree with those DraftTime numbers, but of course, if Haaland's deemed to be fit, he's going to be #1, and if he's not, but Kevin De Bruyne is, Kevin De Bruyne's #1. If they're both out, then I think Foden is the man. So I kind of largely agree with these points with the data that we have at the moment. Let me know in the comments who you're thinking of captaining in Game Week 22. All right, last bit of DraftTime data, and we've got the clean sheet odds next. Man City, 62% to keep a clean sheet against Burnley. That's one of the highest clean sheet odds I think I've seen this season. You know, that's more likely than not, according to Draft Hound, to keep a clean sheet. Crystal Palace are 50-50. Sheffield United at home is a nice fixture. And yes, they were disappointing against Arsenal, but I do feel like Crystal Palace, especially at home, could keep a clean sheet in that one. Arsenal, Nottingham Forest away. It's obviously away at the City Ground, which is a tough place to go. That old football cliche, but I do feel like they could keep a clean sheet in that one. So to Draft Time, they're 48% to keep one against Forest. Brighton on 38 with Luton away. Liverpool 36. Tottenham also on 36. Aston Villa 31. Fulham 31. And usually any team below 30%, I'd be hesitant starting defenders from, because never really back a clean sheet when it's below 30% on the odds. That's just my opinion though. Let me know who your defenders are going to be next week. Little bit of a Salah update. Obviously picked up a hamstring injury in the AFCON playing for Egypt. Jurgen Klopp confirmed that he's going to return to Liverpool to recover from that injury. And then likely, certainly if Egypt get to the later stages of the tournament, I think Klopp specifically mentioned the final. If they get to that stage of the tournament, then he's likely to be released basically back to Egypt to play. That's a little bit of an update, but ultimately it doesn't massively help us with decision making. You know, it hedges on basically how long is the recovery time of this Salah injury, and basically how far Egypt going to get in the AFCON. And we've got some great stats courtesy of Rob T FPL here. It shows the odds of Egypt getting to a certain stage of the competition and which game week they'll be back. I won't draw any conclusions from those odds. I'll just leave them on screen for you to analyse for yourself and have a think. Well, the one thing I would say, I'd caveat that by saying this was Egypt with Mo Salah in the team. So it'd be interesting to see that statistic without him. So with those two things combined, yes, that's a bit of an update, but ultimately there's not a whole lot I don't think we can do with that news. I'd say if I had Salah still in my team and he was just sitting on my bench, still don't think I'd rush to sell him. I reckon a hamstring strain that he has, he's probably out for 2 or 3 weeks with that. I mean, he's a player who rarely gets injured, and when he does, he recovers really, really quickly. Really looks after himself physically. So I don't think the injury is going to be long, which is one sort of string to the bow. The other one is how far did Egypt get, and both of those things are completely unknown really at the moment. So can't really draw any conclusions, but I thought it'd be worth giving an update nonetheless. On now then to players to buy, and I really like the thought of getting Trent Alexander-Arnold in my team for Game Week 22. Obviously missed out on Game Week 21, but I would say he's likely to be back for that Chelsea game. And at 8.5 million, some people might be put off by him. You know, a defender costing 8.5 million in FPL is really, really expensive. I think that's the most expensive defender for, well, certainly a long while. I imagine the likes of Leighton Baines in previous seasons could have been a little bit more, but yeah, he's definitely one of the most expensive in history. But I don't necessarily think of Trent as a defender. I think of him more as a player that can get points through 3 different routes. You know, Liverpool, one of the top teams for clean sheets this season. I think they've conceded the fewest goals in the Premier League. So, you know, he's a good option for clean sheets. He can obviously get goals and assists too. So he's basically an 8.5 million player that can get returns through 3 means. And when you count up the total returns he's had so far against the starts, he's had 13 returns from 17 starts. Now, if you were picking a midfielder, you know, at 8.5 million, who got 13 returns in 17 starts, I think you'd be quite happy with that. So I think that shows the strength that Trent brings. Obviously, we don't have confirmation that he's back for Game Week 22, so need to wait for news on that one. But if he is, I really like him as an option. And I'd imagine, given the length of injury that he was said to have had, that quite a lot of FPL players would probably have sold him. And given they might well have a double game week in 25 as well, I'd be looking to buy him back myself. But the next, well, not player, 4 players I'd look to target are any one of these Arsenal defenders, really. I think Arsenal, they're not necessarily the best defence, but in FPL, I think the players that play in their defence offer the best value. Obviously, most of the Liverpool defence, who I've just spoken about, are premium expensive assets. Man City, there's one who I'll get onto in a second, but most of them, you can't really back them to start every game. Arsenal, I wouldn't say they're all 100% nailed, but certainly Saliba, he's going to play every game he's fit for, and I think Gabriel has solidified himself in the team too. And I think Arteta's really settled on this back 4 now. Barring injuries or slight tactical changes for opposition, I think he'll start with this for most Premier League games. And you look at the upcoming fixtures they've got, certainly 3 of the next 4, I'd heavily back them to keep a clean sheet, right? Nottingham Forest, West Ham and Burnley could all beat Arsenal clean sheets. Liverpool at home is obviously a tough one, but given how cheap some of these Arsenal defenders are, you know, Gabriel just over 5 million, you could just bench him for Game Week 23. And then 26 Newcastle at home. probably a tough one. They could keep a clean sheet that at the moment. Draft Town have them at 36% to do that. And just ranking the 4 players, I'd say there's not a whole lot between them, I don't think, in terms of total points they'll get at the end of the season. I think Saliba will play the most games and the most minutes. I see him starting all 38 Premier League games, barring any injury. Gabriel, I think he probably plays the rest of the Premier League games, although we did see him rotated out of the team at the start. I think of both Gabriel and Saliba, I think I'd pick Gabriel now. He's a little bit cheaper, offers a bit more goal threat. Ben White and Zinchenko are both good options as well. They operate in a bit higher positions than obviously the 2 centre-backs, but from an attacking perspective, they've not been ripping up any trees this season. So I'd probably say the 2 I'd go for. I'd go Gabriel number 1, Saliba number 2, just for the security of starts. That Man City defender that I mentioned is Kyle Walker. Now, I'd say he's pretty much nailed in that Man City team now. Pep's given him the captain's armband, and he's started every game in the Premier League so far. Knowing our luck, we buy him in that double game week in 25. He only starts one of the games. It would be sod's law on that one. But genuinely, I think he's a decent option. Seems to be getting forward a little bit more than he has done in previous seasons. He's got a couple of assists this year from 20 starts. 7 returns from 20 starts. He's not lighting the world up, but I do feel like Man City have really hit their title-winning form now. And those 6 fixtures they've got in the next 5 game weeks, I wouldn't rule out a Man City clean sheet in every one of them. Like, genuinely, they could show up to any of those games and keep a clean sheet without too much difficulty, apart from the odd mistake that Edison makes in goal or something like that. But genuinely, the title-winning form that Man City, we all know they can reach and keep clean sheets as they could in previous seasons. They find that form again. Those 6 fixtures they've got coming up, there could be plenty of clean sheets there. And obviously, that would mean plenty of points for Kyle Walker. And finally, the man that's been getting a lot of talk recently, obviously returning from his, 8-month betting ban, Ivan Toney. We all know he's one of the best forwards in the league, right? He's nailed to start for Brentford, takes their penalties, plays 90 minutes, and he's also, as we know, on the free kicks when Mbeumo's not in the team. He's got a double game week now in 25, and I'd also say, he's relatively fixture-proof. Last season, I remember he got, I think, a couple of goals at the Etihad, or he returned really well at the Etihad, and I'm pretty sure he scored against Arsenal as well, so he's a relatively fixture-proof player. And Brentford, they really show up against the big teams and play really well. So I wouldn't rule against him in a what you would consider to be a traditionally difficult fixture. I look at his stats, you've only got 1 game in 23-24 to base him off of, right? He obviously scored in that one. But last year, 33 starts, 20 goals, 4 assists. And to be honest, he looks on track to repeat something similar, this year. Obviously, he's not going to get 20 returns from limited starts, but the underlying numbers I can imagine will largely match up. I just think he's a great option. Ticks every box you can want of an FPL asset. And I'd say with Ollie Watkins in particular being a bit disappointing in previous game weeks and obviously not taking the Villa penalties, Toney could be a good replacement for him. All right, and that's the end of the video. I chucked loads of information at you ahead of game week 22. So let me know in the comments if you find it useful. If there's anything you agree or disagree with, I'd be interested to hear. If you enjoyed the video, please, of course, just leave me a like rating. I really appreciate that. And subscribe to the Golden Goal channel, which should be just there if you want to see more content from me. And I will see you in my next video.